My brother looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You're too dumb to survive in business." Everyone laughed. My mom chuckled. My dad sipped his wine and said, "At least Ben made it." I had just dropped out of business school after months of fighting panic attacks and professors who didn't know my name. But that night, I didn't cry. I didn't fight back. I just cleared my plate and said, "Thanks for dinner." 10 years later, my brother would be drinking champagne in a building he didn't know I owned. If you've ever been underestimated or dismissed by your own family, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Lillian grew up as the quiet one in a family full of high achievers. Her parents were both academics, and her older brother Ben was the golden child, top of his class, a law degree from Yale, and married into a wealthy family. He ran a successful law firm in downtown Chicago and never missed a chance to remind Lillian of his status. Lillian, on the other hand, struggled to find her place. She enrolled in finance school, hoping to make her own mark, but academia drained her. The rigid lectures, the dismissive professors, the comparison to Ben, it became unbearable. So she dropped out. Not for lack of intelligence, but because she had a different vision. She wanted to build something real, something tangible. Her family saw her decision as a disgrace. At every holiday, every family gathering, she was the failure, the one who couldn't handle real pressure. No one asked her what she was doing. They assumed she was floundering. But Lillian wasn't failing. She was building something. Silently, relentlessly. And while her family mocked her in silence, Lillian spent the next decade in a different kind of classroom, one filled with dust paint and brick. Lillian's first property wasn't glamorous. It was a rundown duplex on the edge of town with chipped paint, a sagging roof, and a leaking basement. The real estate agent barely made eye contact when handing her the keys. "You sure you want to take this one on?" he said, half laughing. She was 23. She had no formal experience, no connections, and barely enough saved for the down payment. But what she lacked in pedigree, she made up for in determination. She lived in that house while she renovated it, pulling up carpets, scrubbing walls, fixing plumbing with YouTube tutorials and trial and error. She burned her fingers on a soldering iron, cried on the bathroom floor after a pipe burst at 2 a.m., and ate cold sandwiches for weeks because the stove didn't work. No one from her family ever visited. Ben, when he found out, texted her one sentence. "So you're a landlord now, just collecting rent like a slumlord?" She didn't reply. Every month, she put away $300 from her first tenant's rent. After a year, she bought another small unit, then another. She drove an old pickup with busted AC and hauled her own supplies. She never hired contractors unless absolutely necessary. She was alone. She was exhausted. And yet she'd never felt more in control. Still, the emotional weight lingered. At family gatherings, Ben would talk loudly about corporate tax reform and asset portfolios, then smirk and ask Lillian, "How's the plumbing business?" Her mother would make tight-lipped comments like, "We just want you to meet someone stable." Her father, ever distant, would say, "It's not too late to finish your degree." No one saw her work. No one asked her what she was building. She was invisible in a family that only saw prestige degrees and titles. But in private, Lillian tracked every number, every square foot owned, every mortgage paid off early, every tenant who renewed because she treated them like people, not rent checks. She didn't need their praise. But their silence, that still hurt. By year 5, she had quietly acquired 7 small residential buildings, nothing flashy duplexes, triplexes, small apartment units in overlooked parts of the city. She learned how to negotiate, how to navigate zoning laws, how to manage tenant relations without letting it consume her life. One winter night, when the boiler broke in a unit across town, she bundled up, drove in a snowstorm, and stood in the freezing crawl space for hours fixing it herself. When the heat finally clicked on the single mother who lived upstairs, started to cry. "You're the first landlord who's ever shown up," she said. That night, Lillian cried too, but not from sadness. From the overwhelming realization that she was building something real, something that mattered. Still, her family didn't know or care. To them, she was just existing. Until the email came. It was from a commercial broker. He was representing a group of investors who wanted to offload a mid-rise building in the financial district. It was underperforming. The tenants, mostly law firms and accounting offices, were reliable, but the management was sloppy, the lease terms outdated. The price was negotiable. Lillian ran the numbers 6 times. She knew this was a leap, but she also knew something else. Ben's firm was listed as a tenant. She bought the building, silently, through an LLC. No announcement, no press, no need. For the first time, she felt not just capable, but powerful. And 3 months later, when she walked into her brother's 15-year anniversary gala carrying trays of champagne like she belonged in the back, she was ready for the moment that would change everything. The invitation arrived in a sleek black envelope embossed with gold foil, celebrating 15 years of excellence. Ben Carter and Associates. Lillian paused. She hadn't seen her brother in nearly a year. Not since she'd quietly finalized the deal to acquire the building his firm operated out of. Ben, of course, had no idea who the new landlord was. The LLC name was generic, just letters and numbers. He hadn't even bothered to read the ownership change memo. He'd forwarded it to his office manager with the note, "Whatever. Just make sure the rent goes through." She considered throwing the invitation away. But something inside her, not resentment, not revenge, but resolve, told her to go. She RSVP'd yes. When she arrived, no one looked twice at her. The ballroom was sparkling glass chandeliers, white roses, a jazz quartet playing by the bar. Waitstaff in black uniforms buzzed around the room. Lillian wasn't on the main guest list. Her name tag was marked Logistics Support. Apparently, her mother had helped find her something useful to do. Someone handed her a tray of champagne. She took it. As she moved through the room, no one recognized her. She heard snippets of conversation. Ben built all this from nothing. The firm is expanding next quarter. He's negotiating a better lease deal soon. I think he's trying to buy the building. Lillian almost smiled. She walked past her father. He didn't even glance her way. Her mother was deep in conversation with one of Ben's in-laws, and Ben himself, standing under a spotlight, drink in hand, laughing with partners and clients. When he saw her, he barely blinked. "Hey, Lil, can you grab more of that rosé?" "Thanks." She nodded. "Sure." But she didn't walk away. Instead, she turned to the stage and gently tapped on the mic. It let out a soft crackle. The jazz band fell quiet. Heads turned. Ben looked confused, then irritated. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice calm but steady. "Before we toast to 15 years of excellence, I just wanted to say," she looked around the room, "I hope everyone's enjoying the view. Especially from my building." Silence. Then murmurs. Then applause from one of the larger clients seated in the front row. The CEO stood up and added, "Oh, you're that Lillian Carter. We've been hoping to meet you." Ben's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Lillian turned to him. "I bought this building 3 months ago. You didn't read the ownership notice, did you?" He stared at her frozen. His law partner leaned over. "Wait, the lease renegotiation. You said it was with some investment group." She smiled politely. "It still is. Just one I happen to own." The tension in the room snapped like glass. Ben's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His wife stepped forward, blinking fast. "Wait, Lillian, I'm the managing partner of Carter Equity Group," she said. "We own 31 commercial properties, soon to be 32. This one was personal." She turned back to the mic. "Congratulations on your 15 years, Ben. Truly. But starting next quarter, we'll be adjusting lease rates to match market value. Negotiations will go through my legal team. Not me. I keep business and family separate now." The room erupted into quiet gasps. Someone clapped. Then someone else. Then another. Ben looked like he'd swallowed gravel. His collar was damp with sweat. His posture, once confident, now slumped. His voice, when it finally returned, was small. "You planned this?" "No," Lillian said softly. "I earned it." And then she walked off stage. Behind the ballroom doors, she leaned against the wall and took one long breath. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. Was that necessary? She didn't answer. A second buzz. "Please don't do this to the family." Still no reply. Then a third from Ben's wife. "Can we talk? I need investment advice." Lillian let out a soft laugh. "Not cruel. Just clear." She wasn't invisible anymore. She didn't need applause, or forgiveness, or even understanding. She had her voice, and now the room finally heard it. But just as the celebration ended and the night faded, Lillian realized something even more powerful than revenge had taken root, the power to choose dignity over destruction. Lillian sat alone in the back seat of her car, the ballroom lights dimming behind her. Her driver, the one she rarely used but hired tonight out of formality, waited in silence, eyes forward. The night air was crisp, but inside, her chest burned. She had done it. She'd exposed the years of belittlement, flipped the narrative, claimed what was hers, publicly, elegantly. No shouting, no insults. Just facts. Truth delivered with grace. So why did her hands tremble? The phone on her lap buzzed again. A fourth text, this time from Ben. "You humiliated me. You destroyed what I've built." She stared at the screen, the words swimming. Destroyed. What had he built, really? A firm, a name, a facade. He hadn't once acknowledged the privilege that paved his path, the way their parents invested in his education, his wedding, his first office lease. Meanwhile, she'd had to scrape together change to replace broken light bulbs. Her heart pounded as she typed back, "No. I simply stopped playing the role you wrote for me." She didn't send it. She deleted it. Another text from her mother. "Your father's upset. He says you crossed a line." I agree. That one hit harder. For a moment, it was no longer the present. It was a memory, sharp, vivid, cruel. Christmas Eve, 10 years ago. Lillian had just finished flipping her first property. She showed up to the family dinner in paint-stained jeans, proudly holding a manila folder with photos and figures, her first full return on investment. She was glowing. She had worked 18-hour days, learned everything from scratch, and finally made something of her own. Ben had laughed. Their dad had said, "That's cute." Her mother had changed the topic to Ben's wife's new diamond bracelet. Lillian had smiled that night too, politely, quietly. She had gone to the bathroom and cried until the turkey got cold. That night, something in her began to freeze. And now, 10 years later, her family still didn't see her. Even with the building, even with the wealth, even with the applause. It wasn't validation she lacked. It was connection. And as she sat in that back seat, the afterglow of revenge slowly turned bitter. Was this what she wanted, to dominate the very people who ignored her, to become the shadow behind their success, not to support it, but to control it? Was this freedom, or just another form of captivity? She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her breath slowed. Her thoughts drifted to the tenants she'd helped during the pandemic, to the community center she was funding in the South End, to the young woman she'd mentored through her first property purchase. That was her legacy. That was her true empire. Not the building. Not her brother. Not their approval. She didn't need a spotlight. She needed peace. Her phone buzzed one last time. Ben again. "I don't know who you are anymore." She stared at it for a long time. And then, with slow and steady fingers, she typed, "That's because you never tried to." This time, she hit send. Back at her apartment, a clean, modern space with wide windows and soft wood floors, she poured herself a glass of red wine and kicked off her shoes. No staff, no noise, just silence and the weight slowly lifting from her chest. She opened her laptop, drafted an email to her legal team. Subject: renewal terms. 8th and Main Tower Ben's building. Body: please proceed with standard market rate renewal. No special consideration. Keep communication strictly professional. Thank you. She hovered over the send button for a moment and clicked. That was it. No drama, no gloating, just business. She was no longer the underdog nor the avenger. She was the decision maker. The next morning, her assistant forwarded a voicemail from Ben's firm. A junior partner flustered and panicked, asking if there's any way to meet with ownership directly to smooth things out. She declined. An hour later, another message, this time from Ben's wife. "I'm sorry about what happened last night. Can we talk? I've been thinking about investing, but I don't know where to start." Lillian stared at the message. There it was again, the weight of her past pushing against the promise of her future. But this time she didn't feel rage. She felt clarity. She opened the message, typed 2 words, "happy to." because forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook, it was about unhooking herself from their grip. And in that quiet clarity, Lillian knew the next step wasn't about who she had defeated, it was about who she would become now that nothing held her back. A week after the party, Lillian found herself on the back porch of a modest lake cabin she had bought 3 years ago. It wasn't glamorous, a far cry from the penthouse she could easily afford, but it was hers. Simple, quiet, and full of meaning. She came here when she needed to think, and she needed to think now. The wind rolled across the lake like a whisper rustling the pine trees that lined the shore. In the distance, a few ducks floated peacefully unbothered by the world. Lillian wrapped herself in a thick cardigan and held a mug of coffee close to her chest. She had turned off her phone. No emails, no notifications, no headlines. Just air and space. For so long, everything had been a reaction. To Ben, to her parents, to the silence in the room every time she spoke up and wasn't heard. Even her success, her empire, had started as a rebuttal. But sitting here now, watching sunlight ripple across the water, she realized something both unsettling and freeing. She didn't want to be fueled by pain anymore. She didn't want to win to prove them wrong. She wanted to win to live fully, freely, authentically. The door creaked open behind her. It was Helen, her oldest tenant, an 84-year-old retired teacher who had once lived in a rent-controlled building Lillian had saved from demolition. Helen had no family nearby, so Lillian often invited her to spend weekends at the lake house. They'd drink tea play cards and talk about life like old friends. "Thought I'd find you brooding out here," Helen said, settling into the chair beside her. Lillian smiled softly. "I'm not brooding. I'm reflecting." "Same thing in a different hat." Helen grinned. "Tell me, what's eating you?" Lillian paused. "I think I'm tired of fighting ghosts." Helen nodded. "It's exhausting, isn't it? Carrying around a war long after the battle's over. I thought I'd feel something after the party, something big, but I don't. Just done." Helen chuckled. "Sounds like healing to me." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't awkward, the kind that said, "We're safe here." Then Lillian said something she hadn't admitted to herself before. "I spent a decade building something so people would finally take me seriously. But now that they do, I don't care if they do or not." Helen took a slow sip of tea. "That's the moment you stop surviving and start living." Lillian looked out at the lake. "I don't want to play defense anymore. I want to build. I want to teach. I want to invest in people who've been ignored like I was." Helen tilted her head. "So why don't you—" Lillian exhaled. It was the most honest breath she'd taken in years. "I will." And just like that, a decision crystallized in her chest, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. That evening, back in the city, she opened her laptop and drafted a new mission statement for Carter Equity Group. It didn't mention profits, or portfolios, or dominance. It said, "We invest in people the world overlooks. We build spaces where dignity lives." She picked up the phone and called her assistant. "Let's restructure our next fund," she said. "I want 30% of our investments to go into women-led startups, especially first-timers. We'll mentor them too." Her assistant paused. "Are you sure that could lower our short-term returns?" Lillian didn't hesitate. "It'll raise our long-term impact." Then she made another call, this time to a small nonprofit that helped young women of color get into real estate. She'd mentored one girl from there years ago, a teenager with braces and fire in her eyes. That girl now owned 2 duplexes and was teaching others how to start. "I want to set up a grant," Lillian told them. "No strings attached, just trust." The woman on the other end nearly cried. But for Lillian, it wasn't charity. It was the next chapter. No more proving, no more chasing, no more shrinking. From now on, she would move through the world not to be seen, but because she belonged in it. And not just at the table. She would own the damn table, invite others to sit, and make sure no one left empty. But with every bold step forward, Lillian also knew not everyone would cheer. Some would fight back, others would resent her rise, and the consequences of her new power were about to arrive. 3 weeks later, Ben received an email. It came from a corporate legal firm, not Lillian, not her assistant. It was a formal notification the lease for his law firm's office space, located in the same building where he had celebrated his 15-year anniversary, would expire in 90 days. The email offered a renewal, but at fair market rate, a rate significantly higher than what Ben had been paying for years. The catch, the lease would now be managed by a separate corporate entity, no more family exceptions. Ben stormed into the building's management office that same afternoon. He demanded to speak to whoever is in charge. The front desk manager, calm and professional, simply smiled. "We don't do walk-ins, sir, but you can schedule a meeting with Ms. Carter's legal team." Ben's face flushed. "Carter, as in—" "Yes," she replied smoothly, "as in Lillian Carter, the building's majority owner." He stood there frozen. For the first time in his life, he truly looked small. Back at home, their mother called Lillian. Her voice for once was soft, measured. "Your father and I would like to talk," she said. "Maybe have dinner, just us." Lillian, polite but unwavering, responded, "You can reach out to my assistant to schedule something next month. I'm fully booked right now." Silence, then a quiet, "Okay." And then came the most unexpected message, a DM from Ben's wife. "Hi, Lillian. I know things have been complicated, but if you ever offer investment mentorship, I'd love to learn from you." Lillian read the message, smiled faintly, and closed her phone. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to say, "I told you so." She had changed the power dynamic without raising her voice. And now, with the dust settled and dignity intact, Lillian reflects on the deeper meaning behind it all in the quiet final moment of her journey. One Sunday morning, Lillian sat on the rooftop of her newest property, not to inspect, not to plan, just to breathe. The city skyline stretched before her like a quiet acknowledgement, no applause, no headlines. But for the first time, she didn't need any of that. She had become the kind of woman she once dreamed of, not loud, not flashy, but solid, rooted. She no longer looked for validation in her brother's approval or her parents' praise. She had found something far more powerful: self-respect. Lillian's empire wasn't built on ego. It was built on every moment she chose dignity over drama, focus over fury. She didn't burn bridges. She simply outgrew the ones too narrow for her worth. And now she walked in rooms not to be seen, but to make space for others. That was her legacy. Because when your presence speaks louder than your pain, you've already won. If you've ever been overlooked or underestimated, know this. You're not broken. You're just building. Share this story if it touched you. Or leave your own in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it.